Hello, guys, and welcome to what I call GFL Talk Radio or the GFL podcast. We are on season 10, episode 1, and I'm here joined by Jason as always. How you doing, Jason?
Doing well, guys. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing pretty well. Doing pretty well. We got a lot we want to get to in this podcast today. I know you guys have been asking for another podcast, so here we are today at 1:45 on a Monday afternoon, getting this in. We're going to start with going over kind of what's happened so far this year, going through the standings and kind of where we see everything is now and where we might see it going. We're going to start with the AFC North and rattling out that division real quick. We've got the Bengals at 4-1, the Browns at 3-3, the Steelers at 2-3, and the Ravens at 2-4. Would you like to start us off, Jason, with some opinions on the AFC North?
Yeah, the division itself has kind of gone a little back and forth actually. If you look at the head-to-head matchups, because I believe the Browns, I think, just gave the Bengals that first loss of the season, and then the Browns played the Ravens last night and barely came out on the losing end. So I think towards the end of the season, this division could be up for grabs because it's still fairly early. A two-game lead isn't insurmountable by any means.
I understand where you're coming from. I think that the Bengals have the best defense in the division as of right now. I think that they're in their probably 2-year window currently that Brett likes to put himself into to compete right now because of some of the moves he made. I mean, Brandon Graham is a win now move, not a let's save up for the future
Yeah.
move.
Yep.
AJ Green is going to start, hitting that Madden regression, and he's not going to be the number one target for forever. So you're going to see a lot of things, I think, that point towards the Bengals trying to win now. The Browns he's a good user, but he's kind of in that in-between mode. The Browns had awful talent to start, and I know he did a good job of kind of bringing in some of his, type of guys that he wants to play his game with. But the way that I'm looking at it is they're a year or two away from competing. So this is probably the Bengals division for the next 2 years. The Steelers, I don't understand it. I don't know how you've only scored 129 points with arguably the best offense in the entire league with Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell. I know that offensive line isn't the greatest thing in the world. They've
Hmm.
actually kind of impressed me on defense. I thought they would be worse. So I think there's potential for the 2-3 Steelers to kind of come up, and all of a sudden we say, "Oh, they're 6-3. This is a completely different."
Yeah.
You, you know what I mean? And the Ravens, we kind of had an offline talk about them. The Ravens deeply trouble me with some of the moves that they've made coming into this year. Specifically, you lack offensive talent. You traded your best offensive lineman to Seattle in the offseason. You had Les Calicio before the game came out. So he was not a part of this line like he had been in the past, which had been a really, really good Ravens line. So you get rid of young guys. I know you've got, or the older guys, I should say. I know you've still got Ronnie Stanley out of Notre Dame at left tackle, who's a pretty good player. But outside of that, who are your wide receivers? I mean, we've gone down this list. Brashad Perriman's a bit of a cheat code, but his catch ratings are down across the board this year, so he's not as much of a cheat code as he was last year. Mike Wallace, that's past its prime. That's expired goods. Kamar Aiken does not inspire any confidence in me whatsoever. And he's got two rookies outside of that. I like the tight ends there, Crockett Gilmore and Max Williams, but you're not going to make a living in this league throwing to your tight ends on every play. You will get shut down by these coverage linebackers that are going to be there, and they're going to be even more in full force in the next couple of years from, my expectations with the way the guys develop players. So drafting DeShone Kizer in the first round, I think, was a monumental mistake that the Ravens had made. And I think that they're going to pay for it because he doesn't have any weapons. So, and on top of that, Joe Flacco, you're still committed to that contract. And 2/3, I think, basically of Joe Flacco's contract was guaranteed. I think it was 54 out of like 82 million is guaranteed. So he's not one of those contracts that you can move and be like, oh, someone's A is going to want to take that contract, and B, someone he's going to be able to get something after the fact because of all of the penalty. Right now, it would cost him $43 million to cut bait with Joe Flacco at this moment. That's insane for you to put that type of investment into a first-round quarterback. Let me break it down to you this way. Joe Flacco will get his balloon year payment the year that DeShone Kizer needs to be re-signed. That, I like James, but I think that's just horrible general manager job. And that defense is aging. So you draft a running back and a quarterback, and you have nothing else.
It puts them in a tough situation, especially later on down the line. Like you mentioned with having to re-sign Kizer the same year that goes into the last year of that contract of Flacco's that jumps up to over 17 million. So it is a tough situation. I look at this Ravens team, and I see some good pieces in the defensive part of him, where in the secondary he's got a couple good young corners. He's got a decent left outside linebacker he drafted as well. So his draft was actually solid on the defensive side, but like you mentioned, offensively, there's really not a whole lot of offensive firepower behind the team. Their biggest strength is being able to run the ball. I'm curious to see how the offense is able to adjust once teams start stacking the box and keeping their rookie running back, that Wayne Gallman, from being able to get 4 or 5 yards of carry like he has been. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think in the long run, you're right. It's going to be tough for him to shed that contract to Joe Flacco and put anything around this team offensively.
No, absolutely. And one more thing I want to throw in there is I'm not sure that anyone is actually going to stack the box. I think that there's still that aura around Perriman that if you stack the box, he's just going to throw it up. You know what I mean? And hope that Perriman wins the foot race. So I personally think when I played him, I think safeties over the top the entire time. Now, granted, I have line to be able to stop the run, so it's a little bit of a different situation from some of the other guys in the league. But I personally was like, 2 safeties over the top. Perriman's going to beat me. It's going to be in double coverage.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'll start to see those types of coverages if he doesn't already. I mean, his biggest, looks like from what I can tell in the passing game, his biggest weapons have been his tight ends so far, and his tight ends are pretty good, like you mentioned with Crockett and Williams. They're not as fleet of foot as some of the upper tier tight ends that you'd find in the league, but they at least get the job done. They're actually both solid in run blocking and pass catching. They're just not very fast. They're just big, wide body targets.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you there. Gallman has actually had a pretty good rookie year, though. Like you were saying, 90 carries, 373 yards, 5 touchdowns. And Brandon Oliver has also been in that mix with 31 carries, 282 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Ravens have been a good running team this year. It's just a question of, will they be able to put the passing game together? Because at some point in this league, you're going to have to be able to pass to win. You can play ball control and defense and run the ball, and you can control a game, but there's going to be points in the game where you're going to go, it's 3rd and 12. I really need this first down. I have to be able to throw the ball to get this first down, and you need to have the weapons to do it.
Yeah, and when teams are able to just on a 3rd and long go up and just man up on you, and just dare you to go deep on them, I think that's what's going to end up happening. You're going to see not as much press coverage, but teams playing man-to-man coverage, but playing off 5 to 6 yards to ensure that you don't have that type of Perriman separation that we normally would see in Madden. I think they'll sit back, but then blitz teams or blitz the offense, going more cover one type of coverage, still with the safety deep over top, and then bring the corner up about 5 or 6 yards away.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Kind of going through and looking at some of the notable AFC North contributors. Zach Weston, that rookie wide receiver that I have not mentioned for the Ravens, has 29 catches for 312 yards. So he's doing all right. Tyler Eifert from the Bengals, 28 catches, 293 yards. Gary Barnidge, 28 catches, 330 yards for the Browns. He loves Barnidge, 4 touchdowns. AJ Green and Josh Gordon, 28 catches each, 433 for Green, 489 for Gordon, both with 2 touchdowns. So that's kind of what's highlighting some of what the AFC North weapons have been doing. Defensively, they really have had no one in the top as far as sacks. You go through, and their division leader in sacks is 4 by Emmanuel Ogba of the Browns. So I'll look for that division to get a little bit more pass rush moving forward. As far as interceptions go, another Adoree Jackson, 3 for the Bengals, 3 from Kayshawn Jarrett for the Bengals, 3 from Joe Hayden of the Browns. So that's kind of where they are defensively. Moving on, I think we're done with the AFC North. I think, like I said, I think the Bengals will win this division. If you have any parting shots, you're more than welcome to throw them in there, Jason.
Yeah, I think when it's all said and done, it probably will end up being the Bengals division to lose, essentially. I think they do have, at least like you said, the better team to win now. It'll be interesting how the future of that team goes, because I do believe I just saw that Vontaze Burfict has denied the contract offer and is going to go into the offseason at least as a restricted free agent. We'll see if they franchise tag him or not. So that'll be something interesting to see.
No, absolutely. I think he'll franchise tag him. I don't think he'll lose him for under any circumstance. But that's going to lead to cap situations down the line, the way that this stuff is managed. So we'll have to see.
Yep.
Moving on to the next AFC division, we have the AFC South, which has been pretty top-heavy for the most part. Going through the division, I've got the Texans at 4-1, the Jags at 4-2, the Titans at 2-3, and the Colts at 0-5. My early thoughts to that is this is the Texans' division to lose. I think the Texans and the Jags have very good matchups. But Texans 126 points for, 77 points against. The Jags have played a lot closer, where they have 110 points for, 103 points against. Those are still 2 pretty good defenses. But the 16-point difference on offense and the nearly 40-point difference on defense has me leaning towards the Texans. And I saw J.J. Watt just beasted out in his last game and had 5 sacks or something like that. So I think Houston's going this way. Osweiler is doing his thing, if you know what I mean. So it's exciting times in Houston for those guys.
Yeah, I would say that at this point, Houston is the favorite. The one thing that has hurt Houston so far this season is they're basically on their 3rd string running back at this point, and we all know how much Jack likes to run the football. It'll be interesting to see how his running game fares over the rest of the season with Charkandrick West as his starter. So far, I mean, he's averaging just over 4 yards a carry. He's got 5 touchdowns on the season. So we'll see. He made that in-season trade to bring Trey Mason over after Lamar Miller went down for this season, and Trey Mason
didn't he not?
What's that?
I think Mason got hurt also.
Yeah, and maybe in his second or third game with the team, Mason ends up getting hurt for the year as well. So he now has got Charkandrick West as his starter, which I could be wrong, but I do not believe he had Charkandrick at the start of the season. I think Charkandrick may have been an in-season free agency pickup. So that kind of shows you how much depth has been lost on the running back side of things, because then he's got Chris Polk. So
absolutely, I agree with you there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting here to see if Jack's going to be able to adjust his offense, if he's going to adjust his offense, I guess first and foremost, and if he is he going to start passing the ball more? Because currently with Osweiler, I think he has 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, so they're not really scoring a whole lot in the air. They're doing a lot of it on the ground. So we'll see how consistent he's able to stay with his third string running back in, essentially carrying the load.
Yeah, I think that the zone offense that they have, zone blocking scheme, if you want to call it that, facilitates that. If you can make a cut as a runner, you can get a couple of yards. I think he can keep it going. I don't think that he'll have the dominant performances that he possibly could have had with Amar Miller or even Trey Mason, who is a pretty decent running back.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a timeshare between Sharkhandrick and Polk. They're very similar though, so I'm kind of surprised that he's using them. Maybe it's just to split the carries. Obviously, you got to do that. But that kind of surprises me. I'm surprised he didn't go and find a guy that has a little bit more speed to complement Sharkhandrick,
Mm-hmm.
more of a bruising runner. But, he has a way of doing things, and he's been pretty successful with it. So we'll have to let him ride with that. I kind of want to talk about the Jags a little bit. They've been a surprising team to some people. They were a very hot pick for Madden 17 with a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
moves that they had made in the offseason prior to the game coming out. Silk has done an excellent job drafting, in my opinion, as well to help improve this team. I think that they're on the upward trajectory. And they have a lot of young talent on this football team that's going to have to be re-signed. I mean, Blake Bortles is a young, good quarterback. You got Yeldon at running back. Those wide receivers, the Allen brothers, Hearns and Robinson, and
Mm-hmm.
I love Rashad Green, who's a Florida State guy. Marquise Lee is here as well. So he's got a lot. Albert Wilson, he's got a lot of weapons.
Yeah, and I think one kind of under the radar pickup, and I'm not quite sure if this was in season this year or if this is the off season, but I really liked the pickup of Charles Clay
Yeah, it
in the
was just
trade that he made with
yep.
Buffalo. Clay, even though he's only got 22 catches for just under 200 yards, the thing with that is he opens up the middle of the field a little bit. He's at least a dangerous enough pass catcher where teams can't float linebackers towards their slot receiver or towards Hearns or Robinson. So I think that was a really good pickup for him for
I
his
think that
passing game.
you're leaving out is that I think Charles Clay brings a little bit more to the run game than Julius Thomas does, and still can catch the passes like Thomas. So I think that may also have been a determining factor because he's got 75 run block, which is not the
Mm-hmm.
great thing in the world, but it's definitely better than Julius Thomas's 64. That when you're trying to run the ball and trying to go, oh, I've got a tight end out here, I could run it or I could pass it. Clay is a much better option in the run game.
Yeah. Well, and even to kind of second the formations where they run double tight end. So you bring both Thomas and Charles Clay out there. Are they running the ball or are they passing the ball? I think it gives you a lot of options, and it makes you a little deceptive when you're coming out in those ace formations with double tight end. You don't know what he's able to do with those types of sets.
Clay is a Swiss Army knife. I know, being a Dolphins fan and having my team drafted him. I watched him, from his early days of being a fullback and kind of one of those positionless guys, if you know what I mean. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
settled in at tight end. He gives you versatility all over the field. Something else most people probably didn't know is if Silk decides that he wants him to block, he is a 79 pass blocker.
Mm-hmm.
So if Silk wants to max protect and he's got a good pass blocking running back in there, you're going to have a really hard time getting to that quarterback.
Yeah, so I think he's going to end up playing a pivotal role down the stretch here. I want to say Clay has been hurt the last week or so. I think he's still going to be out a few more weeks, but if he can come back, if he can come back healthy And if the offense for Jacksonville can at least tread water, score enough points, let the defense do their thing, it's going to come down to the final weeks, at least in my opinion, of the AFC North. And I really think it's going to be up to Jacksonville and Houston. And I don't see the other two teams. I don't believe that they are talented enough on either side of the ball to be able to compete with those two teams at the moment.
I agree with you. Kind of going over those two teams, which are the Titans, who I believe I got to pull this back up. Give me one moment. The Titans in the AFC South, who are 2-3 at this point, they have not impressed me at all. I'll get to why I'm not impressed with them in a second. And the Colts, who are actually currently the only winless team in the league. I don't know what's going on in Indy. I guess they just don't have the offensive success that they've had in the past, and that defense is just awful. I mean, we knew walking into that defense is going to be pretty awful. It's awful, and he's got I think he's got 2 more years of signing free agents and drafts in order to even make that defense like playable.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing at this point right now with Cody is that he's had a few CPU games, and he's had to go on AP for a few weeks. So his team is going to take a hit now. At this point, being where he is at, I just don't foresee any shot at being able to make the playoffs. So really, he's probably best served to start playing a lot of his younger players and getting these guys as much experience as possible and start looking towards how he's going to shape this team going forward and really find out what kind of identity this team's going to have. And do they have enough around Andrew Luck? Do they have a line that is built to protect Andrew Luck? Because that's really been the big problem in Indy for the longest time is poor defensive play, especially in the passing game, and not enough weapons for Andrew Luck, or not being able to have any protection for Andrew Luck.
I personally think it's the protection thing. I think the defense is pretty awful. I am surprised that he's not attempted to trade Vontae Davis to this point. He's kind of one of those teams that's sitting at the low end. He's got a veteran player he can try and sell high on. It wouldn't cost him a lot of money. Now, can he, for a 29-year-old cornerback, is someone going to give up the farm? Absolutely not. You can make your defense better, in my opinion, by subtracting Davis and taking your lumps this year and getting a young player to fill those positions. I mean, going through, Andrew Luck is the obvious guy that you've got to build around on this offense. I like the addition of Jeremy Hill for him. I think that will give him a release valve for Andrew Luck to be able to, have less pressure if he can go, oh, well, I'm going to hand the ball to Jeremy Hill 20 times a game, and let's see you try and, pass rush then. He's still got Robert Turbin. Never been a huge fan of Robert Turbin. Looking at his wide receivers, they've got weapons. T.Y. Hilton is one of those guys where if he's not going to win in the next 2 years, he needs to trade him. He needs to try and trade him. Right now, financially, it doesn't make a lot of sense. He's at about a 50-50 cap penalty, but this upcoming offseason, that may be a big tell. If he's not going to win a lot of games next year, T.Y. Hilton's the type of guy that you got to try and get something for instead of just letting him walk at the end. When you know you're not Moncrief, Dorsett, he's got the weapons. It's the offensive line on offense. I'm telling you, it's not good.
Yeah, he's definitely got to figure out a way of being able to, at least in my opinion, like you said, he's got the running back, he's got weapons on the edges and in the slot because with his 3 receivers. It really, like you said, it's the offensive line, but I look at his defense and he doesn't really have, with the exception of Vontae Davis, there's not really too much out there that really stands up it really stands out and scares you. You know what I mean? Chandler Jones, it was what I thought a good signing, a good pickup for him. Other than that, I mean, he's really.
My comment on that is I think that, like I said, I don't think they're going to be good the next year or two. Chandler Jones is a front half of the contract signing. You know what I mean? Like he's going to be better on the front half than he is on the back half.
Mm-hmm.
So as a Colts team that's not good right now, I'm not trying to sign front half of the contract guys. I'm trying to sign back half of the contract guys. And Chandler Jones doesn't fit that. So what is Chandler Jones going to be in 3 seasons when he wants to compete? It's going to be dead space on his cap. I don't like short-term moves for teams that aren't going to win in the short term. Uh, Another move like that is Manti Te'o. Manti Te'o is, by the time he's getting ready to win, will have to be replaced. Why don't you stick with C.O. Moore there? Because Manti Te'o is not much of an upgrade over C.O. Moore. Moving on, Akeem Ayers is his outside line. Malcolm Smith, Reggie Carter, these guys are awful. These guys are not pass rushers. And it looks like he's playing a 3-4 defense based on the lack of defensive tackles there. And his nose tackles are, underwhelming as well. I mean, this is an entire defense. I mean, you look at the corners, if you take Vontae out, who's going to regress, you got Patrick Robinson, who's going to be probably pretty worthless after this season. Josh Shaw is a young corner prospect, but he's already 25 years old, so he's probably a nickel corner or nothing more. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Daryl Morris is another guy who's trash. Daryl Simon at the end, 26 years old, and you're not going to develop him anymore. He's another fourth corner. So you have 2 fourth corners, a nickel corner, probably another nickel corner, and then a stud corner on your roster. That doesn't really add up. Safeties, TJ Green's a nice young player. I hope he gets better. Will Parks is another nice young player, and he drafted a kid named BJ Jerry out of Mount Union who looks nice as well. So he's got a little bit of talent. Desmond Southward too, in the safety position, but the rest of it's decrepit outside of that.
Yeah, if I like to think you're right. I think he's running a 3-4. I think at this point with his defense, he needs to make sure to get. I would get as many reps for Reuben Foster as possible at middle linebacker. I think he could probably be a pretty solid middle piece there for him. But like you said, there's a lot of that front end talent here, and they're not putting it together as far as his contracts go. There's not a lot of young pieces. I like his safeties. I'm not really that much in love with his corners. Outside of Vontae Davis, like you said, there's really not a whole lot there. I mean, in nickel and dime situations is probably really where this defense is getting torched.
Absolutely. Real quick, let's talk about the Titans. I think that their record is deceiving, even at 2-3. I don't think that team is very good at all. Looking at them real quick, 145 points for, 122 points against, but most of that's because of Sims. He hasn't played a lot of games. His number 1 overall pick, Mike Williams, in my opinion, is one of those skewed stats guys. He had, I'm going to politely call, a very cheesy game with his wide receiver. A 300-plus yard receiving game is definitely not something that, if anyone's listening, that I think that anyone's looking for in the league, if you know what I mean. So if you take away that 320 some odd receiving yard game that he had, he has 596 yards. So what does that leave him at? Like 280 yards for the rest of the year. I think like 19 catches for the rest of the year. You take away, I think it was 3 touchdowns. So he got 3 touchdowns for the rest of the year. Those are not very impressive numbers.
Yeah, and even this last game, his loss against the Raiders, the Raiders played him pretty tough, especially Mike Williams, and they held Williams to only 3 catches. Granted, one of them was a touchdown, but there was no 150-yard game with 8 catches, 2 TDs, or anything like that. They pretty much held him in check for the most part. Philly Brown actually ended up being the leading pass catcher that particular game.
Gotcha. Yeah, they're in shambles, or whatever word you want to use for it. It's not good. I don't think they're very good defensively yet. They've got a couple of pieces on defense. They traded Jarrell Casey away, which I did not get, for Ryan Kerrigan and Brashad Breeland, which doesn't solve any of your problems. That was a lateral move back. And Kerrigan's a veteran now. Jarrell Casey was a much younger prospect. Breland is what he is and is not all that good. He was burnt toast out in Washington last year, and that's the reason they got rid of him. That's another GM that I'm really questioning their GM talents. Frankly, I think that they need to reevaluate what they're doing and try and win some more games based on better GM work.
Yeah, I mean, I like some of their pieces that they have on offense. I think defensively they're getting older and they're not really replacing with very young, uh, good talent. Um, when it comes to this particular team, I think possibly looking to move DeMarco Murray for at least some type of draft pick assets may benefit them. Um, I really think Derrick Henry's got to get more touches than what he's getting so far. He's only ran the ball 5 times on the season. Somehow it looks like he may have dipped to third on the depth chart. How that is even possible, I'm not really sure. Um, I mean, if you're not going to play Derrick Henry, I think he's a valuable trade asset, being as young as he is and as big as he is. Um, but for him to only have 5 carries this year is kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's called bad coach work right there. Is you got to get your young guys in. DeMarco Murray is not going to be around for a long time. You got to look at the future of your franchise and say Derrick Henry's the future of my franchise right now. The running back position.
Yeah, and at the very least, because I look at DeMarco Murray and he's been using him. Like you said, he's got 8 touchdowns, so he's getting inside the red zone and he's effective. Um, but I question Terrence West and the 22 carries that he has gotten this season. I'm not really sure why would those carries not go to Derrick Henry. You've got to
That's just
you
bad coaching. I mean,
yeah
I don't say.
you've got to develop you got to develop that side of your game. And the other thing is I look at him on offense is Delaney Walker is pretty good, but I think they need to get Jason Morrow some snaps in there as well. He's got offensive weapons with the addition of Mike Williams. Mike Williams does help that team go in the right direction offensively. I think most of their problems really go on the defensive side of the ball. They just don't really have a whole lot
See, if
outside.
I was this guy, what would I have done at the number one pick? A, I would have traded back because I can get more. B, I would have looked at my situation and gone, wow, I have a stud offensive line. I have a young running back that I can run the football with. I have a young quarterback that I want to protect. I have some pretty decent wide receivers. Kendall Wright is a decent wide receiver. The other one, he's got Rashard Matthews, former Miami Dolphin. Decent wide receiver. Not anything to sneeze at. Your needs on defense were bigger than going, oh, I'm going to take this wide receiver. And he just missed the ball on that. And it's going to hurt him, I think, because that defense is now a year behind on its development. Like you said, it's getting older. I honestly see the Colts taking over the third slot from the Titans, and I kind of see the Titans free falling back down to the bottom of the division at some point soon.
Yeah, I think with that number one pick, I understand what he was trying to do, but I really think that his best pick would have been the middle linebacker that Raekwon McMillan is who he ended up being, who eventually is who the Eagles took, I believe, with the third pick. McMillan
And
was
they traded Michael Kendricks for, but that's another story
yes,
we'll get down the line too.
yeah. I think that should have been the pick that the Titans went with, and you'd be looking at a completely different type of defense on that team if you had him in the middle. So I think they whiffed on that first pick.
I would agree with you. I think we've beat the AFC South into the ground. It's time to move on to a division that I know very well, the AFC East, considering I've spent my entire time in GFL playing in the AFC East. Uh, we have the Bills right now at 3-2. My Dolphins coming off a bye week at 2-2, 1-3 for the New York Jets, and 1-4 for the New England Patriots. Is Slim still even around? I mean, like, I know he is, but is he really? Like, you know,
I think he's played more games than he has had Sims, at least so far. Um, but as far as I know, he is still around. And here's the thing with that is, if Slim stays around, I think this division is a 4-team race. I don't think there's really any clear-cut favorite so far. I think all four teams have their strengths and weaknesses, and they're all similar teams. So even being at 1-4, you're only 2 games out of first place at the moment.
no, absolutely, absolutely. The Patriots, I think they're feeling the loss of Tom Brady. 94 points for, which is not very New England like, but they've given up the most points in the division at 130. That's pretty alarming. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he did anything to address the loss of the corners in Malcolm Butler and Logan Ryan, so I think they're going to continue to struggle in pass coverage. Good front seven. Secondary is awful outside of Devin McCourty.
Yeah. If you're holding off the pass rush on that team and you're going downfield, chances are those better receivers, like especially the ones in that particular division, Sammy Watkins is going to have a field day on those types of guys. So that's going to be tough for the Patriots. It's kind of going to be either he creates a pass rush and puts teams in very long second and third and long positions. Otherwise, he's going to lose. Like, I just don't see how that back end of the defense is going to hold up.
It's not. It really isn't, I don't think. And they've lost all their games at home. They've one and one on the road. I just think that the Patriots also lack offensive weapons. I think outside of they let LeGarrette Blount go, I believe. They still have Amendola, Edelman, yeah, and Hogan, I believe, is their receivers. Those are all guys that are getting older. Those are Brady type receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Garoppolo is this quarterback right now. You can make an argument that he's not even the best quarterback on that roster. You could say that Jacoby Brissett is, but that's my personal opinion on that. I just think it's going to be a little bit for the Patriots to get back into the swing of things. I honestly don't see them winning more than 4 or 5 games this year.
It's going to be tough. Their defense, like you said, the back four, really say the three, because McCourty, like you said, is pretty good. I just don't see how they're going to not be able to give up less than 300 yards. Like I just don't see how they're going to be able to do that. This is where you're going to see teams throw and throw and throw on that particular defense, and they're probably going to do it with pretty high success rate.
I'd agree with that. Moving on to the New York Jets at 1-3, an old bitter division rival of mine has taken that over. How did this even happen? How did he end up being the Jets? How did he squirm his way back into the AFC East?
I guess it just kind of panned out that way. Because the previous Jets owner just kind of left.
Note on him, he's just disappeared off the face of the earth. I played multiple places with him, and he's just gone, not talking to anybody.
Yeah, so we're not really sure what happened, so we're just gotta pick up and move on. So, yeah, Chris is gonna be the new Jets guy. So, looking at the team and knowing how he likes to play, I think he still has a good solid group of players. His receivers are not very fleet of foot, so he's gonna have some
That's all
trouble.
Chris-like. His receivers are not very Chris-like.
No, they're big bodies to throw the ball up to, and they're good route runners, but they're not going to really blow you off the ball at all. So you may see a lot of teams play a good amount of man coverage on him until he starts putting faster guys in, like Latimer, Devin Smith, and his rookie, the Keyshawn Earl. But then you're getting into those guys don't have quite the hands as what the other two do. But at this point, what are you playing for? Are you playing for the playoffs, or are you playing for down the road? So
I think personally a lot of that depends on who is his starting quarterback. I'm pretty sure the Jets didn't re-sign Ryan Fitzpatrick, uh, which I'm gonna check on that for you guys right now. But
from
who's his
from what
starting quarterback? I don't even know.
from
He's
what
in
I
my
can
division.
see, it looks like it's Brad Kaya is the starting QB right now. At least that's who it probably should be. Because when you've got Christian Hackenberg, who's not bad, but and then Bryce Petty, who's okay. From an overall arm talent standpoint, I don't see how Brad Kaya cannot be your top QB.
In my opinion, based on the way that Kai is set up, he kind of needs to go to those faster receivers. You can't have Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker be your receivers when your quarterback has an 80 deep accuracy rating. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, he's got some work to do with this team. He's got a decent tight end, young rookie. Um, I'm not sure what round he was drafted in, but that Jake Butte or Jake Butt out of Michigan. I'm not really sure what his name is, but
But
he's pretty
his name
good.
is Bud. Yep,
Uh,
he's pretty
he's
good.
yeah, he's a really good tight end. His offensive line is just kind of all right. The defensive front is solid as they've always been.
Actually, I'm
Um,
gonna correct you there. That his offensive line is awful, not all right. Ryan Clady's your left tackle, who's pretty awful. Is arguably your best offensive lineman, who's hurt right now. Oh, I just said something. Offensive lineman's hurt. I know that's a shock to
hmm
you. Nick Mangold, and it's his center, and he's definitely lost a step. Casey Harrell, he drafted out of USC, but that kid is a long way from being ready. And at 81 strength, I don't know that he'll ever help you. Dakota Dozier is his starting right guard, if that tells you anything. Another weak, not very fast off the ball lineman, so I don't know what he's doing there. And Brett Giacomoni or Camini or whatever his name is the right tackle, 31 years old, and that situation is just atrocious.
Yeah, his offensive line needs some work. He's got to get. I think in the draft coming up here is going to be um, a big emphasis for his team. And then I think after that, it's got to be wide receiver. He's got to put some more talent on the offensive side for his QB. His defense is all right in parts. You know, Calvin Pryor on the back end at strong safety. Gilchrist is okay. He's got a nice young rookie, Jeffrey Tompkins, who could probably steal some snaps away from Gilchrist, who actually probably should, given the age difference there. Revis is still, he's not as fast as what he used to be, but he still has good ratings and is still a serviceable enough corner to play and at least make a difference.
This year, I think. I think next year, you have one of two options with Revis. He either plays safety or you cut him because he's not going to be able to play corner pass this year.
Yeah, this is probably his last year in a Jet uniform, I'd say, unless, like you said, he gets moved to safety.
But at that $15 million, I can't see Chris going, oh, it's smart to pay Revis $15 million to play at safety. Nah, I
Yeah,
don't see that happening. And especially you mentioned Gilchrist and Pryor. There's not really much room back there for him. I mean, he could replace Gilchrist theoretically, but I don't know what are you doing with Gilchrist at that point.
exactly. And then kind of going into the middle of his defense here, his biggest star, in my opinion, is Darren Lee. Very fast, very smart middle linebacker, but he's also got Jordan Jenkins, who's another very young left outside linebacker. So he's got some talent as far as in the linebacking core. And then we all know about Sheldon Richardson, Muhammad Wilkerson, and then Leonard Williams up front. So
My question about those guys is he has three defensive ends for two defensive end spots. Is he going to fire Todd Bowles and move to a 4-3 so that he can play one of those guys at defensive tackle at least, if not two of them, depending upon how he wants to do it? Uh, Because to me, you either have to trade one of those defensive linemen because you can't get them all three on the field at the same time, or play a scheme that allows you to get them all on the field at the same time.
Yeah, he's got to get all three of those guys on the field. And it looks like as far as is the way he's lined up his three-man front there is that he's been having Leonard Williams at the nose, which he's a little undersized for a typical nose tackle. He's still 300 pounds, still has solid strength to be able to try to plug up those A gaps. I think he probably would have been better off putting Wilkerson at nose tackle due to the bigger size and the stronger body. So,
I'd agree with
I,
that.
I mean, if I were him, that's what I would look at. I would keep Williams in his normal 3-4 end position because I think that's where he's best suited, and I would actually drop Wilkerson down to nose tackle. But either or, I guess you can't complain with having Leonard Williams as your nose tackle. He's probably better than most other nose tackles in the league, based upon some of the intangibles that he has.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. I definitely don't think that he's Don Terry Poe, for example, who is really the prototypical nose tackle that you would want,
Mm-hmm.
345 pounds, just an animal. I've seen Poe go down a little bit. He's probably down at 325 now, but like a guy like Eddie Goldman on your defense is a prototypical nose tackle, for
Mm-hmm.
example. That's the type of guy that you would expect to play nose tackle, not necessarily Leonard Williams, where you feel like, yeah, he should probably be playing defensive tackle in nickel sets, not necessarily base sets, base defense. But I think the Jets have a lot to figure out, and I think they're funny if they think they're competing in this division this year, even with that quarterback. That offensive line is going to cause him headaches. Moving on to my team, my 2 cents on my team is we've been very inconsistent. I think we're the division champions, and I'm going to say this: we're the division champions until you beat us, because we won the division. We are currently 1-0 in the division. We did beat the Bills week 4. We stumbled against the Bucks to start the year, and then got a shellacking against the Bengals because we couldn't block them for whatever reason. But so we're 2-2 on the year. My offense has really struggled. I am the only team in the league that has 0 passing touchdowns. The next closest teams have 4. So we have not done a lot of throwing. I've only thrown for like 600 yards in 4 games. So I'm giving you the blueprint right now. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. We're going to run the ball and we're going to play defense. And my defense has been pretty good in the games that we've won. And we had one. I think it was the Bengals game got out of hand a little bit. Part of that's due to turnovers on the offensive side of the ball. You can't have those. Tannehill's only thrown 2 picks this year, which by my standards, which I am a pick machine, is pretty low in 4 games. But my team, we're going to go as far as our quarterback wants to take us. So if I can get better quarterback play, I have been improving that offensive line, though. I'm telling you guys right now, Laramie Tunzel has turned into the stud left tackle I 100% expected him to be. Outside of that, I kind of got some patchwork going on. I'm not really in a situation where I would normally want to start a Mackenzie Bernardo or whatever his name is, who's a journeyman lineman, or Juwan James, for example, who is probably going to end up being a journeyman lineman because I'm not a huge fan. I got Tom Compton at right tackle,
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing, and Pouncey, who's a decent center, but he's developed, and you kind of know what he is. He's not elite by any stretch of the imagination. The one thing I will say is defensively, I like my secondary more this year. I kind of reconfigure my secondary. Byron Maxwell has been permanently benched. He will not be playing anymore. In comes another Seattle cast-off, Charles James II, who's a 5'9", 180-pound corner that I have been playing at my starting corner position, who's actually played very well for being a 5'9", 180-pound
Wow.
corner.
Yeah, I mean, like I look at your team, and that's to me on paper, that's like the one glaring issue on your team. I think for the most part, your offensive line is decent enough to get the job done and still be effective. You still have weapons as far as your three receivers go. I mean, those guys can pretty much break a big play at any point in time. All three of them. Uh, so offensively, I think your team is good enough to win. But as pass happy as our league is, and especially as good as some of these receivers are in the AFC, with teams like the Bengals with AJ Green, um, Antonio Brown and the Steelers, Sammy Watkins with the Bills. There's a lot of great receivers, and Xavier Howard is obviously your standout, but some of the other guys you just kind of look at, and if they're playing well now, that is always is a good thing. But are they going to be able to keep that going for the entire season? So that, I guess, that to me would be the one kind of question mark. If your secondary there, your corners in particular, if they can hold up, because your safeties are good. I like the rookie that you have at free safety. I think he's going to be a pretty solid player going forward.
He's actually in the position where I've really been batting around the idea of him playing corner next year, because he's so fast. His coverage skills match that of a corner.
Mm-hmm.
He's not really a press guy, but I don't press. Like, if you look at my corners, I don't press. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have corners. So that's not really an issue for me. I mean, the strength's pretty high for a corner, so probably more of like a run-stopping corner type thing. But I've batted around the idea in my head. I haven't quite gone there yet because I think he could be an elite safety, whereas you don't stand out as much, I think, as a corner. But that's all going to, be based on where I pick this offseason. What can I do with the extra picks I got from the Falcons for my second rounder last year? That type of thing. What's in the draft? What's in free agency? Is there a corner that I'm possibly spend some money on?
Mm-hmm.
I'd want
Yeah.
to get a number one, or possibly, maybe Xavier be my number one and get a number two. I like my slot corner, Bryce McCain. I think that he fits exactly with 89 speed, 89 excel, 83 zone coverage. You got 74 play rec. I think he fits perfect there. So like I said, I think this is my division until someone beats me for it. But let's move on to the Buffalo Bills, unless you got anything else to say about Miami Dolphins.
No, but let's move on to the Bills here. The Bills I'm intrigued with because they've got excellent corners. They're actually their entire secondary is solid for the most part.
Tell me about it. I threw for like 90 yards against them, or 70 yards or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, they are solid. I think Preston Brown and Zach Brown are two solid middle linebackers. Jerry Hughes has always been a good pass rusher off the edge. Darius up front, obviously, he's been a Pro Bowler for years here. Adolphus Washington starting to come into his own here at the left end position.
Absolutely.
I think that defense is a solid defense. When you move to them on offense, I look at their team and everyone always assumes Sammy Watkins. What really stands out to me on this team is the stable of running backs that they have that can damage you at any point in time that they have the ball in their hands.
Yeah, they've got a lot of running backs. I believe it's Leonard Fournette, LaShawn McCoy, and Jonathan Stewart, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so any one of those three, I like Fournette, even though he only has the 84 speed. I think he's quick through the gaps. Obviously, he's strong. He can carry the ball. He's not very elusive, but he does have solid trucking. So I think he is actually a solid short down situation type of player, a third and goal type or short and goal type of player. And that McCoy still has a good year or so left in him, as far as being effective enough as far as his quickness goes, because he could still move.
Yeah, I think that McCoy and John Stewart aren't going to be on the roster next year, personally. I think it's Leonard Fournette's team moving forward. The Bills, kind of what scares me about them is Jordan Leggett, who's a good rookie tight end out of Clemson, 31 catches, 393 yards. His next closest receiver guy who has catches is 18 catches for Sammy Watkins. You combine Watkins and Goodwin, who are his top two receivers, and they don't match the 31 catches that Leggett has. So you know where he's going with the football when he throws it. I mean, let's just be honest. That's where he's going. His Leggett is going to get that football. He had like 5 or 6 catches against me when we played. But if you can shut down Leggett in the fourth quarter and make him throw the ball to Watkins, Goodwin, or Woods, you're in a position where I feel like you can shut him down and make him punt quite a bit.
Yeah, you would have to. At that point, comes that chess match where, he brings Leggett in, and you know, as a defender that's his first read. Do you keep him manned up with a linebacker, or do you go zone and spotlight him, or do you bring a corner in, inside there into an extra defensive back to guard him one-on-one? At that point, then if the Bills can get the running game going, that's going to be key. I think is if they can run the ball, that is going to open up Leggett, or continue to open up his opportunities, but then make things easier for Watkins as well.
They really haven't been able to get it going. 3.2 yards per carry for McCoy, 2.3 for Fournette, 2.8 for John Stewart. It's really a struggle for them to run the football, despite the talented running backs. I think some of that may be the fact that outside of Cordy Glenn, that offensive line is not very talented.
Yeah, they did get. I like Petway. He's got that 86 run block. He's not very strong, but he can
He's
at least
given up 4 sacks already this year, though, so he cannot pass block.
that exactly. Yeah, his pass block is only 75, so yeah, that's kind of what you're losing with him.
Yeah, I think this will be an interesting race between me and Buffalo down the stretch. I respect the other two teams in the division, but I don't think they're going to compete for it. So me and Buffalo play our next game, our second game of the year in Week 7, which is really early for this. I made a comment in GroupMe earlier about the scheduling that was really weird. I have not played the Jets nor the Patriots yet, but I will have played the Bills twice already in 7 weeks, and actually 2 times in 4 weeks, really. So it's definitely an interesting scheduling tidbit. But moving on, have the next division. I believe it's actually the final division of the AFC, and that would be the almighty AFC West. They've had a pretty good year this year. The teams don't have the record that they did early last year, but I think that will change. Broncos are 4-0 right now, and clearly the class of the division. Chiefs at 3-2, Chargers at 3-2, Raiders at 2-2. This is lose some games at some point, so don't let those 3-2 and 2-2 records deceive you. I think the Raiders they're new. They're going to drop some games on down the line, so I could easily see them being kind of what Dennis was for this division last year. A guy who has some ups and some downs, but this is probably his down year. This is a 4 or 5 win Raiders team, probably. The Chargers, I fully expect them to make the playoffs again. I think they'll get their defensive woes under control, and they will get it done. I think that they'll probably make the wild card, one of the wild cards. And, of course, if I win the AFC East, it's going to be San Diego, Miami Part 2 and me getting my ass whooped in the playoffs. But that's another whole nother story. I won't go down my 38-0 playoff ass whooping. The Chiefs, 3-2. That's the team I think is going to kind of fall off. I think they throw too many interceptions. Trubinsky is a rookie quarterback. I don't see them having a positive turnover differential. And I think when you're talking about playoff teams, you generally have a positive playoff or generally you have a positive turnover differential going into the playoffs. Like, between your offense and your defense, maybe you're plus 10 or plus 12 or something like that. Whereas your defense has more takeaways than your offense gives the ball away. So 75 points only allowed by the Broncos is probably the most impressive thing I've seen all year, outside of the Green Bay's defense being otherworldly. So it's the Broncos division to lose. I think the Chargers are in the playoffs. The Chiefs come up just short, and the Raiders fall flat.
Yeah, I'm pretty much going to go with that order as well. At least based on where we're sitting at here. I mean, the most convincing factor I'd say was the game of the Chargers and the Broncos, um, where it was pretty much one-sided to the Broncos side for both the very first attempt they played, as well as then the ass drubbing that happened the second attempt that they played. So
Okay,
I,
so that 50 points that the Broncos scored kind of skews the 125 points that the Chargers have given up. Say that's a 20-point game. You're looking at 95 points, which is a lot more impressive. So it's a one-game thing.
Yeah, going forward, even with the 2-game lead currently, the Broncos don't really have an easy schedule. Um, Going forward here, they've got the Bengals coming up. They got the Texans, so we're gonna have the Brother Bowl happen here. The Broncos have to host the Giants. They have the Eagles still, Patriots, the Chargers again, and then the Bills and Dolphins. So
Yeah, Patriots
they
are probably the easiest team on that schedule, and they're even at 1-4. They're kind of no slouch.
Yeah, and you compare that, it's still a similar schedule for the Chargers. He still has Eagles and Giants, has the Jaguars, the Steelers, um, Cowboys, the Dolphins. I mean, it's going to be tough for both of these teams. This could be an interesting race here as this goes on, with as many good quality opponents both the Chargers and Broncos have. They may not quite have it in the book, but I think when it's all said and done, you probably will see one of these teams with 5 or 6 losses, if not more.
I could see that. I could see that. The AFC West has been a really good division in the league for a while. I don't expect anything short of that. Uh, you know, Looking at kind of where they are stats wise, uh, they all have decent defenses. I think some of their defenses have given up more points than they've expected this year.
Hmm.
That 75 points the Broncos have given up, that's very impressive to me. Like that doesn't just happen on accident. You have to play disciplined defense for an entire game in order to give up that little amount of points. I mean, going through, I kind of expected to see Christian McCaffrey higher on the rushing list. He's 67 carries for 244 yards, 3.6 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. So he's not overly high on that list. Keenan Allen actually leads the league in receiving currently, 40 catches, 624 yards with 8 touchdowns. So Michael's got that passing game going out there. Uh, and some of the other guys in the division aren't really all that close. Uh, Looking at it, going down the list, don't see much as far as AFC West receivers. Amari Cooper shows up with 23 catches, 388 yards. Outside of that, you're starting to get into the lower end guys, or the guys just who haven't performed this year. Defensively, I think that the interception numbers have been low. Outside of Derek Johnson having 3 interceptions for the Chiefs, you gotta love that good old user middle
There
linebacker.
you go.
Uh, so it's been a good division. I expect a great division race moving forward. And any final remarks on the AFC West? We're going to move on to the NFC after this.
Yeah, they'll head to the NFC here. I think you pretty much summed up the sentiment about that division.
Oh, well, speaking of NFC, and we're going to start in the NFC North, as they call it, or the North. We got the 4-1 Packers, who have been mightily impressive. The Bears, who have been at 3-2, have been impressive in their own respect. 1-3 Detroit Lions, who I believe are now ownerless, correct?
That is correct. For the time being, we're working to get that fixed.
Yep. Hopefully we can get that fixed because nobody likes not. Oh, Michael, if you're listening, yes, I know you have you making the playoffs. I think you can make the playoffs without Philip Rivers, even if he's got a broken collarbone. I think you're good enough to do it. So, yeah, just throwing that out there because he did mention me on that. Yeah, I think despite the Phillip Rivers injury, and yeah, I think you'll find that quarterback somewhere. You know, it's not Ryan Tannehill or Joe Flacco or anything like that because you can't afford it, but you'll get him and you'll be good. Going back to the NFC North, 1-3 Lions who are currently an ownerless ship because they're on his move to greener pastures to take over Teddy Two Gloves and the New Orleans Saints. Oh my gosh, he's rolling with Kellen Moore. I may have to eat those words. Yes, Brett, there's a podcast going on. Vikings at 1-4. The thing that scares me about the Vikings right now, Jason, is they've given up 178 points. What happened to the best defense in the league? Like,
I honestly, I really think what has happened is they have not been able to really get anything going offensively. Both with when they had Sam Bradford, and now without Sam Bradford. I think what really started it was the early season injury of his normal quarterback, that Taylor Heineke, I believe is his name. Once he went down for injury, I think it really has started to go downhill for the offense for the Vikings. Because after that, after he was hurt, Stephon Diggs got hurt. Laquan Treadwell, I believe, missed a game. You now have Kyle Rudolph out for a few more weeks.
Smith is hurt, and that's a huge blow to that defense.
Yeah, so I think it's not just on the defense itself. I think what you're seeing is it's harder for the offense to move the ball now because they don't have many threats. I mean, Treadwell's having a solid season so far, but outside of that, they haven't really had any threats on the edge. So you've seen teams that are stacking the box up against the run and not really allowing the Vikings to get much of a running game. You couple that with then having turnovers from interceptions and fumbles, and then you lose someone like Harrison Smith, things start to kind of unravel quickly for you once injuries started to pile up. And I think that's really what has happened to him so far.
I'm going to need an explanation as to why Adrian Peterson doesn't have more than 67 carries. Because he's averaging 5 yards a carry. Why does this guy not have more carries? Your quarterback situation is absolute garbage right now. Why don't you hand the ball to the best running back possibly that we've seen in the last 15 years? In the last 20 years?
That is I see that Peterson really hasn't regressed. I think Peterson probably needs to be taking up some of those carries that McKinnon is picking up. I understand you got Jalen Hurd, young, huge back, that you've got that is still averaging 5.5 per carry.
Jalen Hurd has no resume. Adrian Peterson is the multiple-time over Russian champion, league MVP. I know that stuff doesn't mean anything in Madden, but it does mean something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're also seeing is when your starting quarterback got hurt and you started to get down in games, because his last two losses have been where he's been trailing from behind pretty bad. At that point, you really can't run the ball. You got to start pushing the ball downfield, and that's what.
The problem is, in my opinion, yeah, you got to push the ball down the field. But if you were running the ball and playing more conservative football from a standpoint of, I'm not going to turn the ball over, you wouldn't be down that far in the first place unless your defense is just giving it up. You can just kiss your season goodbye anyway. Apparently my quote of the day today is, I don't know if it doesn't mean anything, but it does mean something. So that's going to be my quote forever.
It's definitely tough watching the team that we had previously go 16-0, kind of throw up a dud in the playoffs, and then now start the season off here as poorly as they have. I think a lot of it has, I shouldn't say a lot of it, but at least some of it, some portion of this comes down to just flat out bad luck. Whether that's injuries or a few plays here or there not going the right way for him. But we all know that her probably at some point is going to turn this around, whether it's this season or into the off season for next year. At the moment, things don't look all that great, but I think when it's all said and done, this team still has a lot of solid pieces um, on their roster. I didn't really like the move of getting rid of Bridgewater, but so, at this point, it's looking like he's got a quarterback problem. So you look back at the Bridgewater trade and you think, was it worth it?
You could make the argument that it wasn't worth it, but Teddy didn't play last year. What was it, undefeated regular season with Heineke or whatever his name is.
Yeah, yeah.
At that point, you're pretty full of yourself. You got a pretty big ego, I would guess, and go, I don't need Teddy Bridgewater. I got this kid Taylor, and Sam can be and we're going to win all the games this year. So I could see it. I could definitely see it.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of this. That's really what has happened, and with him getting his injury at this point, you're scrambling because Sam Bradford was the guy. Then all of a sudden he had a terrible game a couple weeks in a row. So then now he's not the guy anymore. You pull up a guy who I believe was either a free agent or on a practice squad, who is now who at least was the Viking starter, Stefan Pujade, or I can't even pronounce his name. But let's put it this way: he's not very good, and that is what the Vikings have right now. So you're right, Adrian Peterson. They need to just start pounding the ball and trying to do what they do best with all these injuries that they've had so far.
Yeah, I think that says it right there at the Vikings. AP or bust at this point.
Yeah.
The Lions are a captainless ship at this point. Just going over them, they're going to pick pretty high, I would guess, because all those four cells until we get an owner. So that'll be a very high draft pick. Matt Stafford has, in the right hands, can be good. They've got some pieces. That offensive line has been built up a little bit over the last couple of years. Replace a couple of things on defense, and that team will look a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to spend too much time on Detroit, but if you want to throw anything in there, Jason would be my guest.
No, we'll go ahead and just move on since we don't have a user for them quite yet.
Yep. We're moving on to a team that I'll let you take the lead on. You talk a little bit about Chicago Bears.
Well, so far it's kind of been a tale of two different teams here. More specifically, two different offenses. If you look at the numbers from an offensive standpoint, this is probably the best offense, much better than I had last season. Some of the additions that we've gotten with bringing in Martin as our new right guard kind of moved the offensive line around a little bit. So we're actually been able to run the ball some, pass protecting much better compared to last season. So at this point, it's as long as we're not throwing interceptions, we have a good chance of winning. If we're throwing interceptions, it's when that's usually the kind of the dooming sign that we're going to lose, and that's what it's been so far. I've got one touchdown to 9 interceptions in my 2 losses, but then 13 touchdowns to 1 interception in my 3 wins. So that really is the tale of what has gone on so far this season.
So, speaking on that, you mentioned you got Zach Martin, who's a player that I personally traded for last cycle, who was pretty good. What was the motivation behind trading this year's first-round pick to get Zach Martin? Do you believe you're in a position to win now? And maybe, hey, the pick's going to be in the 20s. I don't really care about the pick as much. If it's going to be in the 20s, I can get Zach Martin. Or, it's a double-edged sword because if you lose the rest of the year, the Cowboys could have a top 10 pick. So how did you go about making that decision?
What it really came down to was the off season that we had, bringing in Logan Ryan to man the number one corner spot. And then when the draft actually came up, we made the decision at that point. Once we saw how the first 10 or so picks went, we made our decision at that point to not go quarterback and stick with Sudfeld as our guy of the future here. So once that decision was made and we took the best player available on the board, who just so happened to be a corner, with that pick of Marshawn Lattimore, and then our picks of Riley Billow out of Michigan State, it kind of helped us get these core pieces together who were actually good enough to play right now. Coupled with the fact that we've already got guys like Alshon Jeffrey, Kevin White on the roster, having guys like Kyle Long and Josh Sitton, who aren't getting any younger at this point. We felt like we had the pieces to be competitive right now. And if we could boost the offensive line and be able to run the ball more, especially as the season wears on and it gets colder, it gets more snow, more rain, we're able to run the ball because we've got two bruising backs in the backfield that we like to give the ball to. So that was kind of really the thought process, was that we were in every single game last year with the exception of one. We barely missed the playoffs in the last week of the season. We played the eventual Super Bowl champions last year to a 3-point loss when we actually led for almost 3.5 quarters. So I felt as if, as a team, we were there by the pieces that we added. We knew that we had a good offense, we had a good defense, and I think that a contract for Kyle Fuller wasn't going to be the best option as far as extending that. I felt like we were better off going in the other direction. So once Martin became available, it was kind of assessing, looking at our line, can we do this? If we get a guy like Martin, will this put our offense over kind of this hump here? And so far, it's worked out for us. I think total yards, we have the number one offense in the league currently.
Yeah, I think that the age-old question is going to be, you've got the pieces around him. Will Sudfeld play well enough to earn that position of being your starting quarterback, earning a contract extension, that type of thing? Because that's really going to determine whether, in my mind, if this move makes sense or not. Because if you're in the position where you go, I need to draft a quarterback this offseason, trading your first-round pick is situation that you don't want to be in, or having traded it already, I should say. It's really going to come down to it for you. Like I said, Sudfeld is the linchpin of this entire thing.
Yep.
Moving on, let's talk a little bit about Green Bay. A little bit about Green Bay and Austin. He's got his cheeseheads. He's a Packers fan, from what I understand. So I don't really have to say much. They've been pretty impressive. That defensive number is just absolutely amazing to me. I think that it's a testament to how well that he has played as a defensive user, because you really don't think of Green Bay's defense as being elite in any way, shape, or form, and I don't think he really did anything in the offseason that would make them elite. So I think that's just a very good job by him. 8 touchdowns to 1 interception for Aaron Rodgers. The completion percentage could be a little bit higher than 60, but that's just nitpicking. And Talaferio has taken over as his number one back. Lorenzo Talaferio from previously Baltimore, Don Jackson. He is benched Eddie Lacy. Eddie Lacy has 7 carries this year. So,
well, Eddie Lacy's not benched. He's been hurt, and he's been able to tread water with these other 2 guys while Lacy has been hurt. Lacy, I believe, got hurt either week 1 or week 2, and he's out. He's out for 1 more week.
Yeah, so if he gets him back, that'll be even better. Nelson and Cobb and Richard Rodgers, Devontae Adams, all putting in the work. I think their offensive line has been surprisingly good. A guy that I am utterly shocked by is 11.5 sacks for Mike Daniels. I did not and have not looked at him as that type of player to this point. 8 tackles for loss, from him. The one thing I think that if you're a Packers fan would concern you, the corners aren't really getting interceptions. Clinton Dix has 2 picks. You got one for Ryan, one for Quentin Rollins, one for Hyde, one for Ishmael. But outside of that, Crosby's been good. He's missed 1 kick all year. So, the Packers, there's not a lot to say. They have been a very, very good team. Uh, there's a couple of places you probably look on their defense and go, can they hold up the production they've been getting? Because it's been otherworldly, this early in the year. But I think they're clearly the team to beat in the NFC North until you say something about it.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, they are a good team. I think the story for them is being able to win the turnover battle. Only having the one interception so far in the year has helped help that defense, because when you make a team one dimensional, when an offense is playing from behind and they have to continue to just pass the ball, that works in the defense's favor, because at that point you can just start pinning your ears back and just going after the quarterback. And when you're playing teams that if like their last game against the Vikings, who are depleted when it comes to offensive weapons as far as the passing game goes, it does make it easier because you can just man up and just bring the heat. And I think it's really has been what's working well for them, is they're causing turnovers while keeping the ball safe. And as well as I do, no matter what the X's and O's are, as long as you win the turnover battle, there's a very good chance that you're going to win the game.
I agree with that. I think all around that the Packers are just having an excellent year. It'll be interesting to see in some of these upcoming matchups if they can keep up the defensive numbers and keep Rodgers clean and keep the turnover numbers down on offense. But I think that says everything you need to hear about Green Bay. Any parting shots on the North before we move to the South?
Nope. We just watch out for the Bears, because we're coming. New head coach, been putting work into the practice lab, so we'll see here coming. Hopefully we get some things worked out this bye week and we come out week 7 ready to roll.
Well, on to a bit of a cluster of a division. We have the NFC South, where we have 3 teams at 3-2 and 1 team at 2-2. I'm assuming that just came off a bye. So, this thing is as close as it gets. Panthers 3-2, Buccaneers 3-2, Saints 3-2. I think the Saints are probably going to fall off a little bit with new ownership. And that owner Theron has not consistently shown himself to be a winner in the time that he's been in the league. So, you are what you are until you prove otherwise, as far as I'm concerned. So the Saints will probably go down a little bit. The Bucs, they stole a win from me in week 1. They're a pretty good team, but it looks like they're wildly inconsistent. The Panthers won this division last year, so until it's kind of like my division. Until someone says otherwise, I think the Panthers are going to win this division. Atlanta, 89 points for 88 points allowed in 4 games, so they average about 22 points a game on defense, 22 points a game on offense. So it's going to be a crapshoot whether they're going to win every week or not. That's about as even as it gets. The Buccaneers, I think, will finish second. They probably won't make a wild card, but this is the Panthers division as of now.
Yeah, the Panthers are probably the best team in this division. I think the Bucs, they've got some good pieces on their team. They went out and got Malcolm Brown to be their number 1 corner. Mike Evans is
too.
Yeah, they've got some good players on defense with Levante David, Gerald McCoy. Winston it continues to get better. I'm sorry, Malcolm Butler, not Brown. They've got some good players on this team. Vernon Hargreaves is the second corner, so they've got some talent. I can see them potentially giving the Panthers a run for their money if the Bucs can run the ball and get the Panthers to creep up there. I can see Mike Evans having a field day against that secondary.
It's a possibility. Those guys know each other very well, so I don't think anything is going to surprise one another, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I just think that this division is so wide open. There's so many possibilities that could happen. This is probably the most wide open division outside of the AFC East that I've seen. Uh, so that 128 points from the Panthers allowed has kind of scared me. They have played some good teams,
Mm-hmm.
but there's going to be a lot. I think that the next time we do one of these, we'll have a lot more to say about what has happened and what's going to end up happening. On these teams, Cam Newton's been great. Jameis Winston throws too many interceptions. That's kind of why I have them finishing second. Like I said, Saints take a step back, and the Falcons are going to be, I think, the Falcons at 7-9, 8-8, 6-10, and in that range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
Anything else you want to say about the NFC South? Don't want to gloss over it too much, but there's just a lot going on there, and if we spend too much time on it, guys, you'll be listening to an hour of NFC South talk.
Yeah. No, I think that's pretty much it. I think it's going to be a close division to the end. I personally can see the Bucks pulling it out at the very end of the season, but then again, I can see the Panthers running away with it too. So, I mean, it's one of those where an injury here or a big play there, before you know it, and that could be a completely different division here in 4 weeks. So we'll see.
I agree with you there. The NFC East is next. We have the 4-1 Philadelphia Eagles, led by Ian's Cowboys are at 3-2. Pretty impressive defensive work there. 89 points allowed, I must say. The Giants are at 2-4, and they have given up 81 points. To put that in perspective, the Cowboys have given up half as many points.
That Cowboys defense is playing pretty well.
It is one less game. The Cowboys have played 5 games. The Giants have played 6. So I want to throw that out there as well. They've won their last 2 games, so they might be getting hot. You never know. The Redskins, I love you, Dennis, but your team is just awful this year. 77 points. Your offense is like my offense, except you haven't given up 90 points. You've given up 142. You know what I mean? So you can't win games that way. I think this division, he needs to walk away from Kirk Cousins. I think it's time for a new quarterback in Washington. And he's got to stop making these lateral moves, in my opinion. You can't give up 2 players who are starters in a position on your defense to get 1 starter, in my opinion. That's subtracting too much. And then asking too much of other players that aren't skilled enough to play in those positions.
Yeah.
The Breeland trade, you may have not loved Breeland, and I may have called him burnt toast earlier in the podcast, much like I would call Byron Maxwell burnt toast. But he was a corner you could put on the other side of Josh Norman. I mean, at 1-5, I mean, is he looking at trading any of his veteran players? I mean, he should be in sell mode. If he hasn't made his midseason or his in-season trade or whatever that is, he needs to look at selling one of those players that he doesn't have to pay a lot of money for, as far as when he trades them. So you needs to trade one of those guys, whether it's a Josh Norman, whether, Deshaun Jackson, possibly, those types of guys. If you're not going to win, it's like I was talking about with the Colts earlier in the podcast. If you're not going to win in that year-to-year window, you need to look at yourself in the mirror and go, who do I have that I need to get rid of that I can get value for right now? Because they may not be as valuable in 2 years.
Yep. Yeah, I think
I don't see with Doxson and Crowder there's no reason to have Deshaun Jackson anymore. He's injured right now, so you can't trade him right now, obviously. But
yeah, I think at this point, Deshaun Jackson's got to be one of those guys he looks to part ways with some way, somehow. Maybe get some middle round draft compensation for him. I mean, he's got some young pieces on this team. I like the running backs. I like both Tubbs as the rookie, and Matt Jones is I think needs to get the ball more in this offense here. Jordan Reed is an excellent tight end, one of the best in the league. Like you said, Doxson and Crowder should be the 1-2 guys right there. I mean, on offense, he's got some players. I like the defensive side with Cravens as the middle linebacker. I like the Cameron Sutton kid at corner, and obviously his top pick that he had in the draft here, Miles Garrett, who I think is going to eventually become a top tier defensive end. So yeah, he's got some good players on his team, but I think that the holes that he does have are so big that it's hard for what good he has to overcome some of those other deficiencies.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. From the standpoint from that standpoint, I just don't understand why is Jarrell Casey playing nose tackle?
I mean, Casey he's a big body, but
Yeah, but
he is more of a
you can't pass rush from the nose tackle position. Like
yeah.
that's one of the
It's
things that
taking
he
him
does well.
it takes him out of his normal comfort zone as far as being a pass rusher. Like you said, he's going to be more prone to double teams from a center as well as an extra guard. So that does kind of put him into more of a run blocking type of scheme, and I don't think that really is to Casey's strong suits. Now, from what I can tell here, it looks like he is running a 3-4. So yeah,
Yeah, he's
Casey.
a pass rusher. I mean,
If you had Casey out at defensive end instead of nose tackle, you found a nose tackle, and you went, okay, I'm going to play Miles Garrett on the right side, and instead of Ricky Jean Francois out there, who's a bum. I mean, you can't have 81 strength as a 340.
Yeah. So it looks like he's got Josh Chapman, the 340 pounder out of Alabama, as his starting nose tackle, with Casey on the right end position, and then coming off of Casey is where Miles Garrett is coming from. I think just a simple switch of putting Miles Garrett at the left end, outside linebacker spot, and swapping Preston Smith over might serve him better coming off of that opposite edge.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from with them, but they've got to figure this stuff out if they're going to win in this division. Enough Redskins talk. I think I don't want to beat them up too bad. Let's move on to the Giants. I personally think they may have drafted quarterback a year early. They saw the name and they went for it. I believe he has the kid from Clemson, right?
Yes, he does have Watson, who had been hurt these last few weeks here. I believe he got hurt week 1, so he hasn't actually been able to put together an entire body of work here these early couple of weeks of the season. It's mostly been kind of a committee type of setup between Manning and Brett Hundley.
No, yeah, I get what you're saying. And to answer all of your guys' questions, no, I don't look at the injury report because I don't have time to look at the injury report for every single team and list off who's injured. This would take an extra hour if we did it that way. I just kind of go by what the positions were. Yeah, we get it, Dennis. He does have his 4 sacks. He's been shutting down the round. We got all of that. Sorry to burst your bubble. And to answer your other question, Brett, we talked about the AFC in the beginning of the podcast, and specifically the AFC North was our first topic. So just when this is up, just go start it over and listen to the first topic.
There you go. Yeah, the Giants have been one of those teams decimated by injuries with Landon Collins being out. They've had Sterling Shepard out. Carlos Williams Sr. is out. Deshaun Watson's out for 1 more week. So they've really been hurt with injuries. And I think that's really showing up in their games. That's why they struggled early on. But like you said, Rich has been able to get 2 wins. I believe it's in the last 2 weeks, correct?
That's 2 straight.
Yeah, so yeah, Eagles and 49ers. After he started the season 0-4, and he's got 2 more tough games before bye week with the Seahawks and Broncos. So he's got a pretty tough schedule, especially early on here. These next few, he's got the Chargers in there, and then the rest of the division slate. 2 games with the Cowboys, another game with the Redskins, another game with the Eagles. So Rich has got his work cut out for him here.
Absolutely. I mean, if he can win those division games, he can be in there with the Cowboys and the Eagles. But breaking news, just so you guys know, Aaron Donald, the defensive tackle from the St. Louis Rams, the LA Rams, will be getting the franchise tag, according to Mr. Trey. Breaking news. But back to the NFC East, we've got the Giants. I just thought I played that kid Watson in the preseason. He threw me 5 picks. I'm just not sold on that. I think they went a year early at quarterback. They have weapons. I get it. I thought they could have used more on defense, and that 181 points, I think, is supporting that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I want to move on to the teams that I think have been more impressive, the Cowboys and the Eagles. These 2 teams, this is going to be a dogfight at the end of the year for this division. I really think that I believe they have 1 game left. If they haven't, if they have played already, I'm not a schedule guru. I will check that though. If they have not played yet, or if they have 1 game left, those are going to be the 2 most important games, or the 1 most important game on each of their schedules, in my opinion. I think that's how those games could literally decide who's going to win this division. They have not played this year. The Cowboys and the Eagles play in week 12 and 14. So more towards the end of the season.
Yeah, Jim, looking at this Eagles team, they've got a good record, but we had this conversation about a couple of other teams here. When AC Leonard is your leading receiver, pass catcher, I should say, because he's a tight end, that to me spells trouble. Because I look at these receivers, or lack thereof, getting rid of Jordan Matthews, I thought, was kind of a big deal, because you've got these even younger guys who really aren't producing. It really looks like the Eagles' strengths right now are trying to run the ball. If you're able to stop the run and try to make Carson Wentz go downfield, I just do not see any weapons in the passing game that the Eagles have. You flip that to the Cowboys, and if Dak Prescott cannot turn the ball over, and Ezekiel Elliott starts running just a little bit better, this team is going to be. I think they're going to be the team to beat. I think the Cowboys, from top to bottom, have a better roster and are better shaped to go the long haul as opposed to the Eagles.
No, I completely understand that, and I question why move Michael Kendricks for that 3rd pick when you're going to draft a linebacker. Why move Brandon Graham? Those were guys that helped you win a Super Bowl last year. Why? I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think that trade is going to come back and really hurt the Eagles, because, like you said, you're doing more of a lateral move from going from Kendricks to getting McMillan. There really was no extra incentive along with that particular deal. I don't know if Danielle was hoping that Mike Williams was going to be there for him at number 3, and since he went 1, it was more of a panic mode type of pick. So I just think the Eagles are going to struggle being able to score points consistently. And if that ends up being the case when they go up against the Cowboys here, who have got weapons on the edges that can attack the Eagles defense, and who have also got a good line and a good running back that they can kind of hang their hats on. So I think this Cowboys team, if they could stay healthy, they're probably going to be the team to beat.
I can agree with that. Like I said, week 12 and 14, must-see television. Must-see television. You got to see those games. I think that tells you guys what we know about the NFC East at this point. So let's move on to the NFC West, where we have the Cardinals at 2-3, the Niners at 2-4 and 3, and the Rams at 3-1. The Rams have been very impressive. That's 77 points allowed. I keep going back to that. Defense impresses me as being more of a defensive guy this year myself in the way that I win games. 77 points is a very, very impressive defensive showing in 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
It means that you're letting them average under 20 points a game in a passing league, which is good. I think that this is the Rams division to lose if they want to lose it. That would be up to them, but I just don't. The Seahawks might if Russell Wilson catches fire, but 129 points for 130 points against. The Legion of Boom. Now, granted, that's 6 games versus 4 games. Well, let's throw that out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Legion of Boom is not quite what it used to be. I think I saw it referred to as the Legion of Poo earlier in the chat, and that's not a joke. I saw someone say that. I don't remember who it was.
Someone did say that. I believe it was the Seahawks last opponents. Somebody called them the Legion of Poo. So yes, that did actually happen.
Yeah. So they haven't been quite as good as they had been in the past, and I just see the Rams. That 77 points. It's so impressive to me.
Yeah, the Rams. I think the biggest thing with the Rams is that you have a user who knows his team. He's been able to develop Jared Goff into a serviceable quarterback. You've got Todd Gurley, so he really just he runs the ball a lot. He's going to run the ball. He's going to give it to Gurley about 20 times a game. Garrett Blunt's going to get a few carries in there. Lachey Seastrong's going to get the ball a few times. So he's gonna really pound the ball. Having Jalen Strong helps. I don't really think so far as this year, as far as the passing game goes, that they've really been able to put up a lot of stats. But it's really been their defense. Their defense has been scoring points. I believe he's got a couple of defensive touchdowns already. And that's really where he's been able to put distance between himself and his opponents has really been his defense. He's not really. Jalen Strong has 16 catches for 300 yards, so he's getting big plays, but they're really not throwing the ball a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, these other teams, the Cardinals, they're in a state of flux. They're transition. I would assume. The 49ers, they got to figure out what they're doing at quarterback before they're going to be a serious contender. Defense is old in Seattle and starting to get there. I just think this is the Rams' year. This is going to be the Rams division for the next 2 years, probably, especially if they franchise tag Aaron Donald, keep him in town. But they're going to have to contend with some talent. Leaving town 3+1. There's a lot of young talent on that team. May not be able to sign all of it. So how's he going to do it in replacing it? But for the rest of this year, I think this is his.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to the future of the Rams, you got to find a way of making sure that Aaron Donald stays on your team. So I don't know, is that going to be multiple years of franchise tags?
Okay. I'm sorry. I have to stop you here. I don't know what's happening right now, but Dennis has left the group, and they are asking us what we said about the Redskins on the podcast. So I want to make it abundantly clear that I am not trying to be mean to anybody. I'm trying to be extremely objective in these podcasts. I do not try and trash you. I even said before I gave any of my takes that, hey, I love Dennis, that whole entire thing. So Dennis, please don't take anything we say personally on these. These are all just objective observations from the outside looking in. We're not trying to, down anybody, that type of thing. So if we offended you in any way, shape, or form, I apologize for that. Yeah, so sorry about that, but I had to get that in. So
yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked at the chat, so I haven't seen anything.
I didn't think I said anything that was mean or anything like that. I think it's I said it was time to get rid of some players. figure out what you're doing, get rid of Kirk Cousins, that type of thing. I didn't think it was anything over the top, like, you fucking suck, man. Like, nah, I'm not going to do that to anyone. You know what I mean? Like, trust me, I've been there. I know how it feels to lose and get your ass kicked. So I don't wish that on anybody else. That's most of what we had to talk about the NFC West anyway. This podcast is almost coming up on 2 hours, so we're not going to do too much more. I think
Yeah.
to work. I got to go back to work. That type of thing. But actually, I think this would be a great ending point. Just to reiterate, guys, we're doing this as analysts. I am not trying to come in here and say, hey, you suck. You need to do this. I am going to be critical of you. And if you don't like that, I apologize. I'm not trying to be rude in any way, shape, or form. I'm sure Jason feels the same way. But,
yeah,
we're just going to be a little critical of teams that are not playing well. So that's the truth. And on that note, I think we're going to go ahead and end the broadcast. It's kind of a sour note to end the broadcast on. I hope that this all works out and he was just fucking with all of us. Let's hope it's that, because I'm gonna feel really bad if he quit over the podcast. We may not do any more podcasts if he literally quit over the podcast.
No, he's not quitting. He's messaged me. He's all right.
Okay. I was just making sure, because it's doing podcasts is not worth losing members. So
definitely not. And like I said, I think he's a couple of seasons away from winning, but I think his team's pretty solid in key spots.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like I said, I think if he gets that Kirk Cousins thing figured out, he's got young weapons. You got a couple of guys on the offensive line. You replace two of those, and you get a little bit more on your defense, and all of a sudden you're competing in that East. But
exactly.
That's another story. You know what, guys? We're gonna cut this off here. Thanks for listening. GFL Talk Radio, Season 10, Episode 1. This was Jim and Jason signing off.